Hi, this is Paula Cherie, and you're watching The Artful Entrepreneur. Today, I have with me special guest JV Hilliard. He is an epic and dark fantasy author. JV, can you go ahead and introduce yourself and tell us a little bit more about you and how you got started?
Sure thing. Again, thank you very much for having me on. My name is JV Hilliard, and I am exactly as you described. I'm an epic and dark fantasy author. So if you're a fan of Lord of the Rings or Game of Thrones, or you've ever played Dungeons and Dragons, think sword and sorcery, think Conan the Barbarian, think that kind of stuff, and that's what you'll be reading when you pick up my novels. And so, my series is known as the Warminster Saga. There's four books in it. Three of them are out. The fourth one comes out right around the holidays and it'll complete the first series. And then we're on to the next. So it's a little bit about me and what I'm working on. I'm happy to go into any details as we go on further here.
Awesome. Well, can you tell me about the inspiration behind the Warminster Saga series?
Sure. I am a big nerd and I've been playing Dungeons and Dragons for 20 years. And when COVID hit, I had a little bit of a career change. By day, I'm a DC lobbyist. I do defense and technology lobbying. And when COVID happened, DC was shut down for over a year. And my wife kind of looked at me and she's like, "You're not going to just sit at home doing nothing, right?" Because I'm a busybody, right? And and I
Yep.
own three other businesses, and I love
Wow.
to be an entrepreneur. And so for me, this was a way for me to look at being an author as an entrepreneurial endeavor. So I started what I would describe as what I thought was going to be a single book, and it was going to be my one and done, kick it off the bucket list. And it became pretty popular. And as a result, it's grown into its own business. And therefore, I look at myself as sort of the brand of the business. And I look at my
Yeah.
books as my products. And I'm trying to do my best to market them as part of that. So, the background is, I'm a little later in life when it comes to starting your authorship, but I'm having a heck of a time in the transition. It's so much fun. And the stress that you get doing my day job versus that lack of stress that you have doing this job is night and day. And I'm making that transition to this full time and finding ways of continuing a career in a different direction as part of my portfolio of companies.
Wow, that's fantastic. And it sounds like I was gonna say, like that sounds like an ideal retirement business.
It is. If you
Um,
want to play the back nine doing something, writing books is the way I'd go.
yeah, I mean that is so cool. So how did the books lead to creation of a video game?
Well, I know a fellow serial entrepreneur, and he was a fan of the genre, ended up reading the book over the COVID break, and came to me and said, "Hey, would you ever consider licensing your intellectual property to create a video game?" And when you're an author and you're at book signings or you're at a convention somewhere, the question you most get is, would you like to see this turned into a movie or a Netflix show or
Hmm.
whatever it is? I never expected someone to come at me for a video game, especially right out of the gate. I mean, we had just gotten through book two, and I was still finishing writing books three and four, and I love the concept of it. I'm a big video gamer myself, and so when someone asked me, "Hey, would you like to see this?" I said, "Sure," and I didn't know what to expect. And Melderverse is the company that is adopting it over, so I licensed my IP to them to do it, and I'm not a technologist by trade, so for me, it's been fun watching it through the fishbowl, and watching them start to produce this augmented reality, and then what will eventually be a virtual reality game from it. And from where I sat, all I get to do is storyboard. Like literally, I tell people this is the plot line, the generic framework in which they can work. I have a little bit of artistic license in there, but at the end of the day, it's nice seeing your creation reborn in a different form. In this case, the medium of a video game. And the last year or so, we've been working at it hard, and it'll come out sometime late next year in 2024, and the year after that will be the VR version. So I'm really excited to see that happen.
Wow, that's so cool. So what challenges have you run into so far just bringing it to life?
Well, a lot of it is stuff that you conjure up in your head, right? So it's explaining to people what characters look like, what the scenes look like, what the realm looks like, and the kind of currency they use in the realm, the kind of skills they've developed in the realm, and taking all of that and dropping it into a video game. Now, I can, in my head,
Mhm.
because a lot of my creation has come from years of Dungeons and Dragons play, I've seen it through the eyes of a role player, and it's not much different for a video game, save for the fact you're wrapping around this technology and there's some limitations to what you can do. So even though in my head I see this vast, scape of Warminster as it is in a video game, it takes a different form. And I can take 3 pages to describe a battle scene where you're seeing it in a video game and it's one swing of a sword or one dragon's breath, right? And so it's entirely different because of the form. In this case, the medium is just different. And so for me, it's been the biggest challenge for me is the adaptation, being okay with it, and saying this is cool by me. I'm going to put a big check mark in it. But as an entrepreneur, I also recognize the fact that I don't know what I don't know, and
Yeah.
I stay away from other people's art forms. It's almost like saying if you're, going to go to court, you get a lawyer. If you're going to go in front of the IRS, you get an accountant. Here, I'm not a video game developer, so I know to stay out of their face and let them develop it. And it's an art form for them too, and they're very adaptive. They are very accommodating when it comes to working with me to kind of put the game over the top and make me happy, but I also have to be accommodating for them. There are a lot of things that aren't ever going to make it into the video game that are in the book, even though they might be near and dear to my heart. And I've got to let those things go, which I have. Took me a couple of weeks, but I got over it.
It kind of reminds me, you hear about, what is it? I think it was E.L. James that, like she wrote this book, 50 Shades of Grey. And then like they were talking about like how basically she kind of ruined the movie because I think she had too much input. Like you're supposed to step back and let, the screenwriters and, the movie people do their job. So that's kind of what, as you were describing that, that's exactly the scenario that I was relating it to, I guess.
That's a
Um,
really good example. I mean, I would say that it's a lesson I learned early on. And part of it is let the people know. I'll give you a primary example. One of the other things that's happening with my novels is we're developing it into a graphic novel series. And you're taking rich written content and then having to show it in one square picture. And you're trying to get all that squeezed in. I don't know how to do that, but the
yeah.
graphic artists do, right? And so getting out of their way and understanding they're going to work with me. They're going to try to make it as comfortable for me as possible so that I'm not doing that, because I don't think that I would ever want that to have happen. But I also would like to see my product, in this case my art, translated into in as many form of media as it can, so it can reach as many people. There might be people out there that are gamers that are not readers, or people that will read a graphic artist novel, like nerds like me that don't call them comics when you're older. They're graphic novels, but at the end of the day, they're still comic books, and people read those as opposed to reading a epic fantasy that has 500 pages in it. So you got to know what you know and got to know what you don't, and just get out of the way.
Awesome. Yeah, and I think graphic novels really appeal to people because we are such a visual society. So, but you're right. It's like you got to take all of those written words and translate them into uh, a photo. So that in itself is its own challenge. What elements from the books and the video game do you think will translate well into a visual storytelling format?
Well, I think that the idea that the books were written from my past experiences as a role-playing gamer, and a video gamer is not far afield from that. There are video games that are, you know, single person, your point of view, single shooter kind of games that are out there. And this allows you to create your own avatar in the same way you would create your own D&D character or your own RPG character. And therefore they level up, they gain skills, they gain wealth, they gain power, they gain magic. All of those things that happen in the game also happens in the role-playing game. And since the basis of my story is wrapped around that, I think it's very adaptable to it. So I can see a lot of those elements, especially for gamers that are used to that kind of play, will enjoy this. And because it will eventually be in the VR realm, you can create your own avatar and transition from different things and pick up skills in the game. pay for them or earn them and advance your characters in the same way, and you can play multiple characters at the same time. It's going to be a lot of fun when it's done.
Cool. So now you also are the owner of Altered Reality magazine, and obviously you have plenty of experience as a writer. How, like, I guess, how has your experience been opening up, like running your own magazine? I mean, that's an entirely different endeavor to go from like books to, video games to magazines.
Yeah, so Altered Reality, the story behind that really came from me writing for it. I was an author who had submitted a what is now kind of a Kindle Vella story. It's a young adult fantasy story about a coming of age for a young girl who's working her way through this magical world. And the owner of the magazine at the time had some issues personally and needed to leave the magazine and asked me as a business owner if I could take over the reins for it. And I looked at the product and I was already participating in it. And for me, I'd never sat on the other side of the table. I'm not a publisher, or at least I wasn't at the time. But I'm a businessman and I knew how to wrap around business models that would allow me to, find sponsors for the site, go out and build a social media platform that was there. We opened it up to, deeper cuts of speculative fiction and poetry, allowing for horror and gothic and cryptid stories and things like that that weren't in there before, which I again was a broader audience. So for me, I had to learn on the fly how to run it. And I brought on a couple of partners for it, one who had run an online publication in the past, the other who's kind of
Makes
developed
sense.
into our slush editor and the editor for stuff that comes over when people do their submissions. What we'll do is, she reads them first, we get them published out. My job is really on the business side, but I'm understanding the marketplace better than they might, and vice versa. Like they understand the publishing end of it. And so the three of us have really kind of taken the reins of it and expanded it since then. And we get about, 160, 170,000 views a year. It's a really, I think, well received magazine. We just got an award for a poetry prize for one of our submitters, one of our poets. And we're adding, I
Cool.
think, a social media platform around it that wasn't there before, that will also allow us to help promote an author of the month, a poet of the month, and do some things that they can add to their resumes too.
That's excellent. So teamwork makes the dream work, essentially.
Well said. Well said.
So are you putting the social media? Have you decided whether are you putting it on like Discord or Facebook, Threads,
Yeah. So
whatever the new thing
yeah.
is?
So we're Facebook, Twitter, and Instagram for now. I, as an author, have a Discord. We're building towards Discord and some others. We're always looking to do that. In fact, I think TikTok is the next on the list. We're taking it slow but sure. We're also trying to find out what our authors and the folks that submit to us use most, because we want to mirror them. We want to make sure that we're following them and they're following us in each of those capacities.
Yeah,
So, and Twitter, Facebook, and Insta seem to be the easiest, and the rest of the stuff is
true.
building toward as part of it. And I could easily see a Discord situation where we're doing that. I use it frequently for my authorship, and I think that some authors on our site do that. Not all, but I think everyone's getting there.
Okay. Um, so do you draw any inspiration from like real life places, historical events, mythologies when you're writing?
All of the above. I'm an amateur military historian, and many of the battle scenes that I have in my novels have some form of historical content in them, whether it's the weaponry they use, or a battle formation that they have, or an event that happened that was historic that many people might not know about, but is important. And I just put my own sort of fantasy spin on it as part of the work that I'm doing, on that side. And then, of course, the mythology from around the world. I get inspired by the Norse mythology, Native American mythology, some Asian. I've even had some African cultural stuff that's thrown in there. And I believe that when you're writing a realm, it's important to do. You want to make it as believable as possible. And when you find inspiration from true life sources, it doesn't have to be the same. It could be adjacent to it and just be good enough, because people can suspend disbelief and say, oh, I get where this character is coming from, or I understand this form of cultural X, Y, and Z because I've seen it somewhere else. It feels real to me. And when
Yeah.
you're writing a world that's entirely made up of fantasy, it's important to have it grounded in something that's real so people can take that next step and say, ah, I see what he did there. And that was clever and I'm into it. And that's what I like to do with that stuff.
That's actually a really good tip for anybody wanting to get started into fantasy writing. So, I mean, one of the questions I was going to ask was actually, what advice do you have for aspiring authors looking to break into this genre?
I have three that I typically give at conventions or speeches. The first is make sure as a writer that you write every day. And that doesn't mean you're writing, you know, the entire novel every day. That it doesn't even mean a chapter. It can mean outlining a future chapter. It could be editing something, but get into the muscle memory and the practice, the habit of writing every day. And that helps you
Mm,
break through writer's block. I think that helps you also understand and remember what you've done last. And there are times where I'll write and then I haven't seen a chapter in a month and you can go back and read it. And it's like, oh, well, that was the direction I wanted to take. I have to rewrite some things. If
that makes
you are
sense.
writing every day, you don't have that problem because it's in your head. And when that novel concludes, you've got everything in there and it's self-contained. And, for someone like me, that's the ultimate planner, I can't write by the seat of my pants. I need that structure. And that really, really helps me. And the days that you don't write, I'm not saying you write on holidays or on your vacation and stuff like that, but ultimately try to write something,
Most
even if you're
days.
carrying a notebook in your car, take a quick note. Yeah, all that kind of stuff. The second piece of advice I would give is be open to constructive criticism. There are going to be people out there that leave you 2-star reviews. There are going to be publishers and literary agents and editors and your beta readers that don't like something. Listen to them. You don't have to agree with them, but listen to the angle in which they're taking because they know your genre, they know the industry, they know what their expectations are out in the field, and they're going to know it better than you. And the worst part about it is when you turn over your manuscript to someone to read, you think it's the best thing you like. It's in its best form, and it never is. Like every manuscript I sent, that first draft comes back with like 1,100 mistakes in it, and you just have to go in and suck it up and say, look, they're doing. I'm either paying them to do it, or they're being paid to do this work for you. If you have a publishing company like I do, and they're there trying to make this work for you, and they want it to be the best product too. And so you have to look at it as a
True.
team effort, and it's really a team effort. And the last thing I'll say to an aspiring author is use all the social media, any free tool you can get to promote your stuff. Because in my case, I work with a small niche publisher, and that publishing house, Dragon Moon Press, is exactly what they publish, just in the name, right? Dragon Moon Press, right? They're publishing my kind of stuff with fantasy, sci-fi, a little dystopian. But at the end of the day, they're not one of the big 4 or 5, and they're not going to have the resources that are there. So if I can get free promotions through social media, free promotions on my website, spend time at conventions and book signings and libraries and finding local book clubs to go and talk in front of, all that stuff is free marketing except for the time you're putting into it. And it just makes sense, especially if you're looking at it through the eyes of an entrepreneur and you're pushing this, that's your product. You need to get it out there, and you're your brand. You got to get out there with it, right?
Yes.
So, those are the three pieces of advice I would give.
I'm so glad you said that because, when you are an artist, you're also an entrepreneur. And so many people write books, but then they don't go anywhere because they don't know how to promote them. So, I mean, you just basically said what to do. Go to the book clubs, promote it on social media, get in front of people and talk about it, and go to the conventions. So, and as you mentioned, when you went to that convention, somebody approached a video game or a movie. So I think that's excellent. So the other thing I wanted to ask, since we are talking about entrepreneurship, is how do you manage your time effectively? You got a lot of irons in the fire.
Yeah. So, for me, I've been a serial entrepreneur since my mid 20s. I've owned half a dozen companies, exited them, some successfully, others not so successfully. I look at my authorship as its own business. So it has its own books.
Mhm.
I've incorporated it under an LLC that is Excalibur Communications. I am lucky in the sense that I'm able to afford to have an assistant who can take care of the day-to-day stuff in terms
Yeah.
of social media, some light editing. Also, she happens to be an author, so she, like me, understands the marketplace. And so that was a little investment, right? I had to put, as a look at it as risk capital, as an entrepreneur does. And I said, look, by bringing her on, I'm going to be able to do so much more. And she understands it. It's not like I have to sit there and look over her shoulder. And as a result, I am running a better business as an author for that. I'm not asking her to go giving my speeches. She's not traveling to conventions with me. But here I think the goal really is for me to make sure that I have as many resources as possible. And you're not always going to have that. So for me, that's one way that I've been able to keep myself from not going insane. In doing this as I manage my other businesses, but also, I think that there's a natural ebb and flow to my other businesses that are seasonal, and this is something that I can plan around. So I know when I've got a dip, that's when I'm doing a lot of writing, and when I'm
Mhm.
starting to crest up, then my writing stuff has to be in editing. And if you manage your time well and you have the resource, you dedicate the resources to it, then I think you can manage that. And that's what I've been doing. And it's a little bit of a bob and weave, but it works out well for me.
Great. So it's essentially like delegating, figuring out, like I always have to figure out when I delegate stuff or hire stuff out, I have to pick the tasks that are going to make me the most money. Transcribing a podcast is not going to make me the most money. Like that's stuff that I can outsource. And then, of course, as you said, managing your time, knowing how long it takes you to do X things so that you can get it done in a certain amount of time. Going back to your Warminster Saga series in the video game, like, are there any specific messages or ideas that you hope readers take away?
Well, sure. I mean, I think that good authors and good books harken back to your own life and some of the challenges you have. So for me, I think inherent in any good book is overcoming struggle. And that struggle can be lots of different things. It could be, simply health struggles, characters in the novels that you see combating some sort of ailment and they've overcome it. And not, I think that gives, folks in the real world hope. I also think it's realistic to see people that are not always going to be the healthiest Superman, and there are going to be flaws in these characters, and so you see those. I also write about trollborn, which, from my perspective, is a word used in the realm of Warminster to describe someone of mixed racial birth, and one of the main characters is part human and part raven elf, and his challenge is he's falling in love with elven princess who is of the highest caste of elves, and she's not allowed to consort with him. He's not supposed to consort with her out of duty, but they're falling in love with one another. She's making a determination of whether or not this forbidden love is for her, and it's the right thing to do, is kind of cast away the social mores of her caste. He's looking at it and saying, I should walk away for the benefit of the realm, but I just can't. And during the course of the 3 or 4 novels, you get to learn whether or not they kind of break the mold, right? And and Trollborn is my muggle, to use a Harry Potter term. It's a way of making people think about those things, and it's another form of struggle. And then, of course, I think a theme of redemption, something that you
Mm,
see, whether it's through a
yeah.
hero's journey or in the case of the villain, do they have a chance to come back to the light after being in the dark? And most people, I think that, when you read a good book or you watch a good movie, when you get to that villain part, villains aren't born evil. Very rarely is somebody just inherently evil. Something happened to them and they might have made a bad choice
Mhm.
that pushed them down a path. And as an author, you want to give them the opportunity to maybe come back, and not all do. And I'm not going to spoil alert my own books, but not all of my villains come back, right? And they sometimes stay where they are in the dark or the shadows, like Tolkien would say. And but for me, I think that's important to have those kind of real life struggles that people can identify with, because it again pulls them back from this fantasy world into something that they can identify with and say, I
Right.
get that struggle, that forbidden love. Oh, I get that. Or I get that struggle. Is he going to make the call to redeem? And you always want to give someone a second chance, no matter how bad they are. And in this case, my books offer that in a couple of different ways.
So reality, I don't know much about reality gaming, but I would say, do you see this genre growing and expanding? How do you envision it fitting into like the the broader landscape of storytelling and gaming. I mean, I guess storytelling and gaming already go together. I mean, people have been doing it for forever.
Yeah, I mean, yeah, you see a lot of books translated into games. You see a lot of games translated into books and movies. That it already exists. But to your point about augmented reality and virtual reality, there's two parts here. I mean, I think augmented reality has existed for the last 10 years. I mean, we've all played Pokemon Go growing up, or have seen people play Pokemon Go, and that technology is proven, and it exists out there. And how it blends into the business of authorship is that many games, even in your PlayStation games, you see ads from companies that buy space there. Well, this is a way for a company, like, say, for example, in my game, you go in and you slay the dragon and you go through the dragon's treasure. Your avatar is going to level up. They're going to get money, they're going to get experience points, they're going to get magic. But in that magic chest is a QR code. And that QR code says to level up and become the next, sir, knight, or lady, whatever, go visit your local Starbucks or your Subway and ping this QR code, and you'll get a buy one get one, or a free Coke, or whatever it might be, as part of that. And so they can advertise those things and translate them not only to just brand awareness within the game, but sales conversions outside of the game. And I think as an entrepreneur, that's a way for many of us authors to monetize that as we expand ourselves in that marketplace. Secondly, on the VR side, the virtual reality, I think, is proven to be in its infancy, which is why our game isn't coming out until late 2025. I think we'll see the arrival of the Apple products that they've got with their new goggles, and some things that they've got going on that will make a VR experience much more palatable. Instead of walking around with these clunky headsets on, we're not going to see that with the new generation stuff in the next couple of years. And so our game, I think, is going to be timed in a way that it's going to hit a marketplace when it's going to be much more socially acceptable to be wearing these things even outside of your home, and being able to, see your computer screen at the same time and send an email by looking at it and swiping it in front of you, like you see in Marvel movies. I mean, that we're not that far away from that. And ultimately,
Yeah,
if you're a fan of Ready Player One, watch the movie. If you haven't read the book, you'll see
yeah,
that, and it's not that far away. And so for us, I think it's riding the right wave. And we don't at the beginning, you don't have to be the best, you just have to be the first, right? And then you'll get recognition for that, and you can
true.
monetize that as an entrepreneur. But down the road, you want to be the best. You want to have the industry standard. And I think by us coming out of the gate early on the VR side, I think that will help us down the road, because we'll have experienced it and we'll know where to go, and we'll have sort of those business insights you'll need to make it successful.
But it's kind of wild to think that, we're not that far from like walking around with these goggles and.
No, no, no. It's
Yeah,
it's it's our it's already happening. We haven't seen it yet in mass, but it will happen when those Apple products drop next year. And you see people walking around, they're not going to be walking around with these clunky things and walking into walls and tripping over dogs. Those things, it's going to
true.
be
They're
a
going to be
little
small.
different. Yeah, and it's going to be a lot more different. You'll be able to see the real world around you, and it will be this augmented reality that'll be around you. And that's where we're hitting it first, right? So that's where that AR stuff comes in.
Cool. So you have a new book coming out this month, right?
I do. The book
Yeah.
three, the Trillius Gambit, launches, and it will be the second to last book in the series. And it's a continuation of the saga at its core. The three main characters, the good guys, the heroes in Daemus Alaric, Sir Ritter of Vulcaneer, and Princess Adeline Elspeth, advance their storylines against the evil, mean-spirited, draconian Grey Taurus the Mad, who is now transformed into a new form. And I don't give anything away until people read it. But if you got through the end of the second book, you'll see where this is going to go in books 3 and 4. And they finally come together, where Daemus has that moment where he matures and is now ready to face the villain that will take place in book 4, as well as Ritter and Adeline finally kind of, maybe they get together. That forbidden love I was telling you about before. I don't want to give too much away. Read the book, you'll see it. But Trillius Gambit comes out this week, and book 4 that'll end the series will come out right before the holidays here in 2023.
Oh, fantastic. So you have, like I said, you have so many different projects going on, but I feel like I learned a lot from you today, and I think our listeners definitely are learning a lot as well. So if I wanted to buy your book, I'm assuming they're listed on Amazon. I mean, is that where you would prefer people to go?
Yeah, people can buy it pretty ubiquitously. So if you want to go to dragonmoonpress.com and buy it right from my publisher, you can do it there. You mentioned Amazon. If you're an Amazon shopper and shop by Prime, you can buy it there. If you want to download an audiobook copy, you can go to Audible or
Ooh,
iTunes or Kobo
nice.
or any of the folks that do that. In ebooks, you can pick it up through, again, Kindle direct publishing, or you can go to Barnes and Noble, or you can find anywhere where you're going to
Okay.
download your ebook onto your Nook or your Kindle. Those are places where you can find it. But even walking into your bookstore, hopefully not in a used bookstore just yet, but still, I'll take it if it's there, get it resold, right? So, but
Hey, create a
yeah,
fan,
it's pretty
right?
much, yeah, anywhere you look for JV Hilliard, you'll find my stuff.
Great. And and to that end, like I really think, especially since you mentioned you are doing the video games, and the on all of that. I mean, like I said, they'll just gonna if they find you in a bookstore or used bookstore, they're just gonna follow you right onto all of your
That's
other
the hope, right?
projects.
That's exactly.
I like that. So, and then your altered reality magazine, you have a website listed for that, alteredrealitymag.com. Is I don't know if somebody wants to buy it. I'm assuming they're going to buy it directly from the
Oh, it's
website.
free. It's free. They don't have to
Oh,
buy it. They can download it. So we update it twice a month, the 15th and the 30th of every month. There'll be new stories, new poems in there from a variety of authors that publish in sci-fi, fantasy, horror, anything that would be described as speculative fiction. And then once a quarter, we come out with a free PDF. Our new one this summer is going to be like horror summer camp, sort of like Jason meets Freddy kind of stuff that we're doing for summer horror, and that'll come out in August. But that it's all free. But if you want to get in front of a bunch of people, and whether they're people that are going to be downloading stuff or reading our stuff, and you want to sponsor, we'd be more than happy to have you on as a sponsor. We can do some right rail pieces. We can do some thumbnails on the bottom for your books and things like that. But visit alteredrealitymag.com and you'll check it out. But it is a freebie for everybody. It's for the
oh,
love of the game, right?
that's great. Well,
Yeah.
and it helps build that community too. So,
Yeah.
um, well, I thank you so much for being a guest today, and I hope you have a wonderful rest of your day.
Yeah, and it's a pleasure being on here. I really appreciate the opportunity to get in front of you and your audience. And if anybody needs anything from me, I'm really accessible. You can find me at joe@jvhilliard.com. Email me. I usually respond within 24 hours. So happy to help and answer any follow-up questions. Or if people ping you about me, just reach out to me there.
Wonderful. Thank you.
My pleasure. Thanks for having me today. I appreciate it.
Yeah.